Hey guys, welcome back to The Readers. I hope you are having an amazing day. Let's get right into the stories. The first one is a pro-revenge story. I used to work at a medical center's data operations hub starting in 2019. Our team was stationed in a windowless room 24/7, surrounded by rows of humming servers. Our main tasks were monitoring system alerts, ensuring nothing overheated, and handling routine maintenance like backup management. Simple stuff, really. Though it was labeled as a tech position, several employees had been there since the early 2000s, back when the job mainly involved changing printer paper and entering commands into ancient IBM systems. The specialized equipment and software were so outdated that skills learned there weren't useful anywhere else. It had become a dead-end position. Because some staff weren't tech-savvy, management limited everyone's responsibilities. You can't give server access to some people and not others, so we all operated at the level of the least skilled person. Imagine working in a network operations center where nobody could touch the network equipment. Speaking of the least skilled person, meet my supervisor, Susan. Not her actual name, but it fits her personality perfectly. She'd been there for over 20 years and got the position purely through seniority. A true narcissist and possibly the most unpleasant person I've ever met in my professional life. In early 2020, our center merged with another hospital's facility. Susan got demoted to shift lead and had to work the same rotating schedule as the rest of us. She was terrible at the job, and our responsibilities kept shrinking because everything had to be simple enough for her to handle. Susan was both unmotivated and incompetent. After 2 years, I received a promotion. On my first day as her supervisor, she cornered me in the break room and said, "You know you're going to fail miserably at this, right?" I replied, "Thanks for the vote of confidence, Susan. I'll keep that in mind." But Susan wielded a powerful weapon: hospital bureaucracy. The facility was unionized, meaning there was a just cause firing policy instead of at-will employment, even for non-union staff. While this generally protected workers, it created ridiculous situations where you couldn't lose your job unless you repeatedly messed up or showed up intoxicated. We had an employee steal computers and keep their job, and Susan, with her 3 decades of service, was practically untouchable without substantial documentation. The real problem was her negligence. One of our critical responsibilities was monitoring alert systems for lab results. One day in 2022, an alert came in while Susan was watching cat videos. She ignored it. Because of this, a cardiac ICU patient's crucial blood work results didn't reach the surgical team in time. The patient didn't make it. During the review meeting, I asked, "Susan, why didn't you respond to the alert?" She shrugged and said, "I was going to get to it eventually. Not my fault they were in such a rush." This still wasn't enough to get her fired. HR's response? Well, we can't directly attribute the outcome to her delay. I started documenting everything, not minor slip-ups, but serious incidents that affected patient care. Verbal warning, first written warning, second written warning, final written warning, termination. It was exhausting, but necessary. Then Susan figured out the loophole. As she approached termination, she'd file harassment complaints against different co-workers. Each investigation took 6 months, during which the disciplinary process paused. The warnings expired after 6 months, so she'd always reset the clock. One day in 2023, I was venting to our IT director, Mark. "There has to be something we can do," I said. Mark sighed. "Even the CIO's hands are tied. She's got another 20 years until retirement, and she knows how to work the system." That's when it hit me. What if we required everyone in network operations to pass the Network Plus certification? It wasn't impossibly hard, but it wasn't simple either. I was confident everyone except Susan could pass it. We'd offer better titles, significant raises, and more responsibilities, things the team wanted. I spent 3 years in endless meetings, HR discussions, director meetings, CIO presentations. One job description meeting lasted 6 hours just to change a few words. The bureaucratic process was mind-numbing, but the raises were crucial. You can't just say, "Pass this test or lose your job," without proper compensation. Finally, in early 2024, it got approved. I included the requirement in my own job description too, partly to show leadership, partly to maintain my skills, and yes, for that sweet pay increase. When I announced it to the team, their response was positive. "This means we'll actually get to work with the network equipment?" asked Tom, one of our newer techs. "Exactly," I replied, "plus a 20% raise after passing the exam." The hospital provided everything: paid training, study materials, exam fees, and dedicated study time. We gave everyone 8 months to pass. I wanted 0 excuses from Susan about the process being unfair. Everyone passed their first try except Susan. She failed 3 times, including an extra attempt we didn't have to give her. In her final week, she stormed into my office. This whole thing was a conspiracy to get rid of me. You planned this for years. I kept my face neutral. Susan, this was about modernizing our department. Not everything is about you. The day we let her go, September 15th, 2024, was unforgettable. She never believed it would actually happen. After nearly a decade of dealing with her, it was over. The next day, walking through the main office was like being a celebrity. The CIO stopped me and said, "Finally, we can sleep easier knowing our patients are safer. If only they knew the full story." Back at the data center, the atmosphere transformed. People were learning, growing, and some found better opportunities elsewhere. The stress of walking on eggshells around Susan vanished. New employees heard stories about her that sounded exaggerated. They weren't. I orchestrated a years-long workplace conspiracy that improved everyone's lives and enhanced patient safety. It's my proudest professional achievement, and I can never list it on my resume. The next one is an entitled People's Story. I never thought I'd find myself in a battle with a homeowners association, especially since I don't even live in one. Yet here I am, about to tell you how I had to fight tooth and nail to keep my family's lakeside cabin from being illegally seized by an overzealous homeowners association that had absolutely no right to it. My grandfather built our cabin on Lake Mitchell back in 1962. It's been in our family ever since, passed down to my father and then to me. It's a modest 2-bedroom log cabin set on 3 acres of wooded lakefront property, about 45 minutes outside the city. The cabin itself isn't fancy, just a cozy place where we spend weekends fishing, swimming, and making memories with the kids. The trouble started last summer when a luxury housing development called Mitchell Lake Estates began construction about half a mile down the shoreline from our cabin. They were building massive McMansions that looked completely out of place among the old cottages and cabins that had been there for generations. I didn't like it, but there wasn't much I could do about it. They bought the land fair and square. One Saturday morning in July, I drove up to the cabin with my kids for our usual weekend getaway. As we pulled up the gravel driveway, I noticed 2 men in polo shirts walking around our property with clipboards. They were photographing the cabin and measuring things with laser devices. "Can I help you?" I called out as I got out of my truck. "This is private property." One of the men, a tall guy with graying hair and an artificial tan, turned and gave me what I assume he thought was a winning smile. "Ah, perfect timing. I'm Robert Kensington, president of the Mitchell Lake Estates Homeowners Association. This is our compliance inspector, Jim." I frowned. "Okay, but why are you on my property?" "Well, we're conducting our initial property assessments for all homes within the development. I must say, this structure is quite out of compliance with our architectural guidelines. The rustic look really doesn't fit with our luxury lakefront aesthetic." I couldn't believe what I was hearing. "This cabin isn't part of your development. It's been in my family since 1962. Robert's smile turned condescending. "I'm afraid you're mistaken. According to our survey maps, this parcel falls within the Mitchell Lake Estates boundaries. We'll need to schedule an immediate inspection of the interior, and you'll need to submit plans for bringing the property up to Homeowners Association standards within 30 days. "Get off my property," I said firmly. "This land isn't part of your development. I have the deed and property records to prove it." Now, Robert said, holding up his hands. "There's no need to be hostile. We're simply doing our job ensuring all properties meet community standards. If you continue to be uncooperative, we'll have no choice but to begin issuing fines." My 12-year-old daughter Emma tugged at my sleeve. "Dad, what's going on?" "Nothing, sweetie. These men were just leaving." I turned back to Robert and Jim. "I'm telling you one last time, leave my property now, or I'm calling the police." Robert's fake smile vanished. "Very well, but you'll be hearing from our attorneys. The Homeowners Association has a zero-tolerance policy for non-compliant properties." They finally left, climbing into a shiny black SUV with Mitchell Lake Estates decals on the doors. I tried not to let it ruin our weekend, but I was worried. The next morning, I called my cousin Sarah, who happens to be a real estate attorney. I explained the situation and emailed her copies of my property deed and records. "They don't have a leg to stand on," she assured me. "Your property boundaries are clearly documented. They're either incompetent or trying to pull a fast one. I'll send them a cease and desist letter first thing Monday morning." Sure enough, the following week I received a certified letter from the Mitchell Lake Estates Homeowners Association. It claimed my property was in violation of multiple Homeowners Association guidelines and demanded I submit to an inspection and begin renovations within 30 days or face daily fines of $500. I immediately forwarded it to Sarah. She fired back a strongly worded legal response, including copies of my property records and surveys clearly showing my land was not part of their development. We assumed that would be the end of it. We were wrong. 2 weeks later, I arrived at the cabin to find a notice of non-compliance plastered on my front door and orange violation stickers on all my windows. The notice claimed I now owed $7,000 in fines and had 48 hours to allow an inspection or face legal action and property seizure. I was livid. I called Sarah again and she advised me to document everything and install security cameras. I bought a comprehensive security system that weekend and set up cameras covering every angle of the property. The following Saturday, the cameras proved their worth. They caught Robert and 3 other homeowners association board members attempting to enter my cabin using a locksmith. I immediately called the police and rushed up to the property. When I arrived, 2 sheriff's deputies were already there. Robert was trying to convince them they had legal authority to enter the property. This structure is non-compliant with homeowners association regulations, he insisted, waving a stack of papers. We have the right to inspect and ensure compliance. May I see those documents? One deputy asked. He reviewed them briefly, then turned to me. Sir, do you have your property deed and records? I pulled up the electronic copies on my phone, including Sarah's legal responses to the homeowners association. The deputy examined them, then turned back to Robert. Mr. Kensington, these documents clearly show this property is not part of your development. You have no authority here. You are attempting to break and enter, which is a crime. The property owner would be well within his rights to press charges. Robert's face turned red. This is ridiculous. We'll see what our attorneys have to say. Please do, I replied. I'm sure they'll be very interested in seeing the video footage of you attempting to break into my property. The deputies advised Robert and his crew to leave immediately and not return unless they wanted to face criminal charges. They complied, but Robert shot me a venomous look as they left. That evening, Sarah helped me file for an emergency restraining order against the Homeowners Association and its board members. The judge granted it the following Monday. We also began preparing a civil lawsuit for harassment and attempted property theft. But the Homeowners Association wasn't done yet. They filed their own lawsuit claiming my property was rightfully part of their development based on a supposed land survey from 1960, 2 years before my grandfather even built the cabin. Their filing included clearly doctored documents attempting to show they owned the land. This is actually good news, Sarah told me. They just handed us proof of fraud. With these fabricated documents, we can go after them for much more than just harassment. The case moved surprisingly quickly. The Homeowners Association's own attorneys withdrew from the case after seeing our evidence, saying they couldn't ethically proceed. Robert hired a sketchy lawyer who specialized in aggressive property litigation, but even he couldn't spin their fraudulent documents into anything legitimate. During discovery, we uncovered emails between Robert and other board members revealing their true scheme. They had been systematically targeting older properties around their development, trying to bully owners into selling below market value or simply seizing properties through fraudulent homeowners association claims. They'd already succeeded with 2 other cabins whose elderly owners couldn't fight back. When presented with this evidence in court, Robert's attorney immediately pushed for a settlement, but I refused. I wanted this to go to trial. I wanted everything made public. The trial lasted 3 days. The Homeowners Association's case fell apart almost immediately when their own surveyor admitted under oath that he had been pressured to alter property lines on official documents. The jury deliberated for less than 2 hours before ruling entirely in my favor. The judge's verdict was devastating for the Homeowners Association. They were ordered to pay $150,000 in compensatory damages for harassment and attempted property theft, plus $500,000 in punitive damages. The judge also ordered a criminal investigation into their fraudulent practices. Robert and 2 other board members were ultimately charged with multiple felonies, including attempted grand theft, fraud, and falsifying official documents. They all took plea deals to avoid jail time, but had to pay substantial fines and serve probation. The Mitchell Lake Estates development fell into disarray after the scandal. Many buyers pulled out of their contracts, and the developer eventually abandoned the project. The half-built McMansions sat empty for months before being bought at auction by a more reasonable developer who turned them into normal lake homes without an homeowners association. These days, things are peaceful again at our cabin. The criminal investigation revealed 7 other property owners who had been similarly targeted by the Homeowners Association scheme. They all got their properties back, plus compensation. We've formed a tight-knit community, helping each other maintain our cabins and watching out for any signs of trouble. Emma, now 13, loves telling visitors the story of how we fought off the evil Homeowners Association empire, her words. I've tried to teach her that the real lesson isn't about fighting, but about standing up for what's right and not letting bullies push you around, no matter how powerful they seem. Last summer, we hosted a big barbecue for all the cabin owners who had been targeted by the Homeowners Association. Sitting around the campfire, sharing stories and watching our kids play, I felt grateful not just for keeping our family cabin, but for being part of preserving this little piece of lake life for future generations. Sarah still jokes that she should have charged me her full hourly rate, but I know she enjoyed taking down the corrupt homeowners association as much as I did. She did let me pay her in several cases of her favorite wine and unlimited access to the cabin during summer weekends. The whole ordeal taught me a lot about standing up for your rights and the importance of proper documentation. I've heard from dozens of other people dealing with aggressive homeowners associations who found hope in our story. My advice is always the same. Document everything, know your rights, and don't be afraid to fight back when you're in the right. Our cabin looks exactly the same as it did when my grandfather built it. Rustic, cozy, and completely non-compliant with luxury development standards, and that's exactly how it should be. As for Robert Kensington, last I heard, he moved to Florida to pursue other opportunities. I honestly hope he learned something from all this, but somehow I doubt it. The important thing is that he and his corrupt homeowners association can't hurt anyone else here at Lake Mitchell. Sometimes at sunset, sitting on the dock with my kids, I look down the shoreline where those McMansions were supposed to be. Instead of a wall of identical luxury homes, there's still a variety of unique cabins and cottages, each with its own character and story. It reminds me that some things are worth fighting for, and that sometimes the little guy really can win against corporate greed and corruption. The legal battle cost me time, money, and more than a few sleepless nights. But preserving our family's legacy and helping other property owners keep their homes made it all worthwhile. Plus, the settlement money paid for a nice new dock and boat lift, which I consider karma's way of saying, good job. These days, the only property inspections at our cabin are from grandkids checking if the cookie jar is full and fish measuring their luck against our ruler. That's exactly how it should be at a family lake cabin. No homeowners associations required. The next one is a malicious compliances story. I worked at a hardware store about 7 years ago. We sold big gas bottles, 11 kilograms or 24 in feedum units of LPG, and if you brought in an empty bottle, we would give you a filled one in exchange for a price. How it worked was that the customer came to the checkout, expressed their wishes on what kind of bottle they needed, and paid. The gas bottles were given to them outside the store at a loading station for bigger goods. The checkout machine would print automatically 2 receipts, one normal receipt and one the customer would hand over to a worker in the loading station outside the store as a proof they paid for the gas. By law, we had to always verbally offer a receipt to every customer. This is to prevent selling things under the table, and a cashier could get fined if they didn't offer a receipt. So a lot of customers automatically deny having the receipt and just tell you, no receipt thanks, before you even open your mouth. Some take the receipt but just drop it directly at the trash bins right after the checkout. In comes the villain, a middle-aged man who wants to exchange his empty bottle to a filled one. He's being a generic a-hole and barely acknowledged me. The cashier in my mid-20s, he pays and takes the receipts. He crumbles them up and throws it at me. He said he didn't need a receipt. Working in customer service was not a peak career point, and as every sane person knows, customers are often wrong. However, never ever had I been disrespected so much that someone would throw a piece of trash at me. In kicks the malicious compliance. I knew the dude needed the receipt to get what he paid for. So I took the receipt ball he had made, dropped it quietly to the big trash bin next to me, and started helping the next customer in line. The disrespectful man took a few steps away, realized his mistake, and said he actually needs the receipt back. I was busy already with the next customer, so with the brightest smile and happy tone I said, "Sure, it's in here," and handed the trash bin to him. Divine Justice had also arranged it so that we had cleaned the checkout floors quite recently, and emptied the dust into the trash bin. He had to handpick his receipt ball from the middle of gray dust, old chewing gums, and whatever yucky stuff had ended up in the huge bin. I'm glad to say the a-hole turned a lot nicer and lost his demeaning attitude as he was shuffling through the trashes. The next one is an entitled people story. I recently went on a residential trip where the arrangement was that girls stayed downstairs while boys stayed upstairs. Female adults usually stayed near the girls' dorms, and male adults were with the boys. However, there was a man, let's call him John, who made me feel extremely uncomfortable throughout the trip. John was on the same minibus as me on the way there. I was quiet and reserved because the younger kids were immature, so I kept to myself. When I spoke to the adults, I was calm and polite. Things changed when we got to the dorms. I was assigned a room with girls my age, where I felt more comfortable. John would constantly come into our dorm without knocking, which felt invasive. He would just stand there and ask, "What are you guys doing?" It happened so often that I spoke to a friend about it, and she agreed it was weird. What made it worse was how he would single me out. He'd bend down to look at me in my bunk and even found excuses to come into the room, like making jokes about me wanting a cup. The breaking point was when I walked into the dorm one day to find my friend nearly naked with only a towel covering her front while her back was exposed. John had been lingering outside our dorm just moments before. I told her about it, and we decided I'd guard the door so no men could just walk in. This annoyed me because we shouldn't have to go to such lengths for privacy. On the last night, when we were being loud and having fun, he barged in again without knocking and started talking about reading the Bible to us. One of the girls is Muslim, so we tried to politely tell him it wasn't necessary, but he ignored us. I finally snapped and said, "It's like you're obsessed with our room because you keep coming in without knocking. You don't do this with the boys' rooms." He got defensive and claimed he already dealt with the boys' noise and accused me of acting out because others were around. He said, "You're normally quiet. Don't give me verbal now." I stood up for myself, saying, "Don't make assumptions about me just because you don't know me. I'm comfortable with these people now, so I'm being myself." He dismissed me, told me to mind my business, and left me feeling shut down and disrespected. Later, he returned while one of the girls was still changing. Instead of apologizing or leaving, he turned around and insisted she was changed enough because she had a bra top on. He stayed in the room to read the Bible despite everyone asking him to leave. This whole experience left me feeling disrespected and uncomfortable. Privacy was completely disregarded, and his behavior crossed so many boundaries. Am I overreacting, or is this as inappropriate as it felt to me? Thank you for watching. I would really appreciate it if you could like the video and subscribe to our channel if you haven't already. We'll see you again tomorrow.